There was no funeral, no big Hollywood service, no lines of black cars, and no public place for everyone to say goodbye when the king of late-night TV died. But in the quiet that followed, one name kept coming back over and over. The name of a person no one saw coming was Strange. He tried to erase the memory of this ghost from his past. Who was this person? Why did their story keep coming back to haunt Johnny Carson in the last few years of his life? The man who had put America to bed for 30 years died on January 23, 2005. No one could argue that Johnny Carson was the best late-night host. He went peacefully at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The stated cause was respiratory failure, which was caused by the emphysema he had been dealing with. He was 79 years old. Jeff Sotz, his nephew, put out a clear and strong message. He died surrounded by his family, who will miss him very much. There will be no service to remember them. It was shocking, but the choice was right on the money. It's hard to believe that Johnny Carson was so private for someone who performed every night for millions of people. His co-host and friend Dick Cavett once talked about how awkward Carson was around other people, and how hard it was for him to make small talk with a few fans outside the studio. His faithful friend and partner for 30 years, Ed McMahon, once said, "Johnny was comfortable in front of 20 million people and completely uncomfortable in front of 20. People often said that he was the most private and famous man who had ever lived. In death, he finally had the peace he had always wanted. His body was burned, and his wife Alexis Moss got the ashes. There would be no public event or place for his famous co-workers and friends to get together and tell stories. There were only a few people present when the man whose last show was seen by an amazing 50 million people died. The whole world mourned in its own unique ways. Honors came in from the top levels of government. President George W. Bush said he was a steady and comforting power. Jay Leno, who took over The Tonight Show after him, called him the gold standard. And David Letterman, who Carson thought was his real heir, said, "All of us who came after are pretenders." This was one of the most moving tributes. He is someone we will never see again. Fans put flowers and notes on his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and at Johnny Carson Park, which is right next to the NBC offices where he had worked for a long time. But how could there be a guest if there wasn't a funeral? And in a life full of thousands of friends and a few strong enemies, hearing his name mentioned after he died would have really shocked everyone. The question is not who was there, but who wasn't there for so long. The surprise visitor wasn't someone who showed up that day. The ghost of a friendship and betrayal that were so strong that they shaped both of their lives for the rest of their days. It was about the person Johnny Carson could never forget. You have to know the beginning to know the end. People knew Joan Rivers as a comedian before she became famous. She had worked in city clubs in New York's Greenwich Village for years by the early 1960s, passing a hat that sometimes didn't even come back. To pay the bills, she slept in her car and did temp jobs. After just one appearance on the Jack Paar version of The Tonight Show, she was kicked off the show. She had tried out 7 times for Johnny Carson's Tonight Show but failed each time. Many people in the business told her that her career was over in 1965, when she was only 31 years old. Then there was the night of February 17, 1965. It was an emergency booking that her boss set up as a favor since he also worked with Bill Cosby. Rivers thought it was her last chance when she walked out on stage, but an amazing thing happened. She remembered later, it was one of those nights when everything works out, when all the stars are aligned, and the audience and I just clicked. The most important person saw that she wasn't just funny, she was exciting. When her show was over, and she was sitting on the couch next to the host, Johnny Carson spoke to her and said the words that would change her life forever. He told her on national TV, "You're going to be a star." Rivers remembered looking behind her and wondering who he might be talking to. She said that the way they worked together on TV was magical. At that time, a bond was made. Carson did more than just let her off the hook. He fought for her and helped her. She would say that he gave me my job for years to come. After that night, Joan Rivers was always on The Tonight Show. Over the next 20 years, she showed up at almost 100 events. Their banter on air was famous. He was the cool, unflappable king, and she was the smart, funny court jester who could make him laugh so hard he cried. He really did believe in her. Johnny Carson was Rivers' very first famous guest on her short-lived daytime talk show in 1968. This was a huge show of support. It got bigger and bigger for her on the show. As early as 1981, she filled in as host when Carson was away on vacation. By 1983, she was officially named the show's regular guest host. There was a lot of trust in this role. She had the kingdom's keys while Johnny was away. In the eyes of the public and the business world, she was the queen in waiting. She had nothing but love for Carson. Afterward, she said that over the years, she had turned down many offers to host her own show because she wanted to stay with The Tonight Show. But this little thing changes everything. Even though they seemed friendly on air, their partnership was mostly business. It was there in front of the cameras, and under the hot studio lights. Rivers wrote, "Our friendship only existed on camera in front of America. We still didn't have anything to say to each other when the red light went out during the commercial breaks. It wasn't that they didn't like each other. It was because Carson was known for being very distant. He put up walls around himself. It wasn't like they were close friends who told each other everything. There was a skilled order. He was the king, the kind person who found her, and made her a member of his court. This hidden balance of power is important for understanding the terrible betrayal that was to come." It felt like the ground beneath Joan Rivers' feet was shaking by the middle of the 1980s. She had felt safe in her job as Carson's number 2 for years. Things began to shift though. Carson signed a new 2-year deal with NBC in 1985. However, Rivers was only given a 1-year deal. The meaning was clear to her. It could only mean one thing, she wrote. Powers didn't know what would happen to me in the future. Then the bigger blow hit. At NBC, a memo started going around with the names of comedians who were being thought about as possible long-term replacements for Johnny, when he chose to retire. That chair had been used by Rivers for more hours than anyone else except Johnny. She thought her name would be first on the list, but she felt terrible when she saw it. It did not have her name on it at all. A terrible truth came to her. NBC would never let a woman be the show. She thought that being a guest show was a safe way for the network to use her skills without seeing her as a real threat to the king or his replacement. At this very moment when everyone was weak, a new person joined the game. Fox was getting ready to launch, and its leaders, including Barry Diller, wanted to make a big deal out of it. They came up to Joan Rivers and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Joan Rivers was on her own late-night talk show called The Late Show. The show would air at the same time as The Tonight Show right after it. The pay was a crazy $10 million, which was a lot more than what she was making at NBC. Rivers had to make a very hard choice. She loved Johnny because he had made her, but she felt like the network he worked for didn't care about her or respect her. Edgar Rosenberg, her boss and husband, gave her some bad advice. It was his order that she not talk to Carson until the deal with Fox was signed. The way he thought was based on cold, hard Hollywood logic. Other comedians who used to be regulars on The Tonight Show but left to start their own shows were often banned from Carson's show right away. For some reason, the Fox deal might not go through if she told Johnny. She might then have nothing left. Even worse, they both thought Carson, who was known for being very strong, could end her deal with just one quiet phone call. She chose to stay quiet, which she would rue for the rest of her life. The news got out over the weekend before it was officially made public. You can't say for sure what happened next because 2 different versions of the story went public. Joan Rivers says she was shocked that he heard it from someone else. She tried to call him right away to explain. She told him she was going to host her own show on Fox when she finally got him on the phone. He didn't say anything. He put the phone down. She called them back because she thought they were cut off. He called her again and then hung up. That was it. They were not going to talk to each other again. The one Johnny Carson did was very different. He said that phone call never took place. Like everyone else, he told them that he found out about her new show from a press statement. He felt totally caught off guard, betrayed, and caught off guard by the person he had fought for over 20 years. What made him respond so badly? Some male actors had left to start their own shows, and while there was sometimes tension, Carson usually let them go. Rivers had her own idea, and it went much deeper than just professional competition. Afterward, she wrote, "I think he really thought that because I was a woman, I was his and wouldn't leave him. I believe it was a matter of I found you, you're mine. As a woman, he didn't like that. I faced him. In Carson's world, a man who left to compete was driven. It was treason for a woman to leave. They disobeyed the king, so he would be very angry and hurt very badly. Johnny Carson was the most powerful person in TV, and he used all of his power to punish her. The first and most clear result was that she was kicked off The Tonight Show right away, and for good. He wouldn't let her back into the studio that had become her second home for the rest of Carson's time there, and for years after he left. But it was a lot more than that. Carson made something that was pretty much a blacklist. People who had been guests on Joan Rivers' Late Show were told they could no longer be guests on The Tonight Show. It was easy for famous people and their agents to make their decisions. It's your choice. Work on the upstart network's new show that's having trouble, or work on the most important and powerful show in TV history. Carson was picked by almost everyone. Rivers had a hard time getting A-list people to come. She says that an NBC executive who is also her friend told her straight out, "We are going to destroy you." The Late Show first aired on October 9, 1986, and had problems almost right away. The show had a hard time behind the scenes because it didn't have any big-name guests and Carson's numbers were through the roof. Things got even worse. Rivers' husband. While Edgar was a producer on the show, he was constantly at odds with Fox execs. In less than a year, the network told Joan she had to make a choice. Get rid of her husband. She said no. Fox fired them both in May 1987. The shame at work was unbearable, but a terrible loss in their personal life was about to make it all disappear. The failure of the show, the huge bills they had racked up, and the public shame put too much stress on her marriage to bear. Edgar Rosenberg killed himself 3 months after they were fired. Joan Rivers was by herself during the worst time of her life. Her career was a mess. Her husband was not there. During it all, the guy who had once been her biggest supporter kept quiet. No one called Johnny Carson. He didn't send a note. He never said a single word of sympathy. The feud went from being a nasty Hollywood fight to a really dark and sad story because of this one action, or lack of action. It showed a side of Carson that his fans had never seen. A man with such a strong grudge that he had no sense of humanity or common sense. As Rivers would later say, explaining how she felt cut off from the world she used to rule. It felt like Stalin had sent me to Siberia. There was no going back for the king's punishment. Let's go back to that January 2005 day when it was quiet. Once people heard that Johnny Carson had died, one of the first things that came to their minds was his long-running feud with Joan Rivers. She lived on in his memory like a ghost, the one loose end that the master of control could never tie up. They didn't have a real funeral, so her story was the tribute he never got. She was the surprise guest. The way she felt about his death was as difficult and raw as their relationship. There was no easy way to show grief. Instead, what she said in public showed a complicated mix of long-lasting anger, deep hurt, and a shocking amount of respect for the job. She was very honest in one interview, and called him a mean son of a but right after that, she would say that he was also the smartest straight man ever. He doesn't get touched. Even though it had been almost 20 years, the pain was still very new. She didn't say she felt bad about taking the Fox show, but she did say she missed the chance to be gracious that Carson had missed. She talked about a different finish to their story in an interview she gave right before she died. She said that Johnny should have had her back on the show, and asked her, "Where have you been? After everything that happened, after I quit the show, after I was fired from Fox, and after Edgar killed himself. It should have been in every newspaper, and we should have picked it up right away. It would have been the classiest thing for the classiest man on TV to do. Forgive." It never did happen though. Rivers was still trying to get over his death, even though it had been years. She went to the graveyard where Carson's ashes were buried on an episode of her reality show Joan and Melissa. Joan Knows Best. The cameras were rolling as she tried to finally talk to the man who had cut her out of his life. She spoke to the empty room as a last sad attempt to make peace. That's why Joan Rivers was the real guest at Johnny Carson's wake. After retiring in 1992, he went back to his very private life and never talked about the fight in public again, but she had to deal with the results in the open. She was the only one who told the story of their broken friendship in interviews and on stage for years, because he didn't say a word. Her words and her pain were the loudest reminders of his past at the moment of his death. The surprise visitor wasn't someone standing in a church. There was no getting away from the sad, unforgettable image of the person he had built up and cannot forgive. John Carson finally got the quiet exit he always wanted. People didn't come together to watch or remember, but the story of the person he could never forgive filled the silence. He didn't expect a person to show up at the end of his life, but a memory did. In one statement, he made a friend, and then ended the friendship with the click of a phone button. At the court of the King of Late Nights, it was the last silent sign of how much devotion he expected and how terrible it was to betray him.